Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too. Me too. Me too. If all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem.
The thing that I think we started out this thing with what was your first reaction to Me Too is honestly the deafening silence from men. Just silence. And not, I hear you, I'm listening, but just, I don't have to respond because this doesn't really affect me. That is the pinnacle of male privilege. And if you're unaware, or if it doesn't change or affect your life in any direct way to respond to this, then you are benefiting from privilege. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is a good way to end this off. So I'm going to leave this with ask you guys with two thoughts. So, the first one is, the question is to the audience in general, what would you want to leave them with your final thought on? And the second part of this is part 2, 3, I don't know anymore. But the next, when we talk to the men, what would be one question that you would want us to cover in the conversation?
Who are men listening to this, and the first step is just, if you think it's wrong, just say it. Talk to people, that's awesome. Cool. That would be a really easy starting point. Simple. As difficult as it may be, it's more difficult being the person on the other side of it. Yeah. If you think it's difficult to say, hey man, it's not cool that you can't call that girl. Think about all the experience that girl has had that led up to that. And so it'll be a little easier. So my closing thoughts would be, first of all, the evil that you pass by is the evil you tolerate. That's where you set your standard. What you pass by is what you would tolerate or agree with. And there's a whole lot of that. But fundamentally, the question I'd like to have answered from men, kind of a two-part question, is A, what are you actively doing within your own gender group to combat this? And B, if the answer is nothing, why do you feel that there is nothing for you to do?
Hey everybody, Curtis here. Hey, it's been, 5 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 5 days, since the maelstrom of the Me Too thing went viral on social media. I just want to talk to you about the absolute imperative nature it is that we keep that conversation going. Don't let it become a trend that sort of whistles in the wind. This is a really important topic because, I have a lot of friends who are women, and I have to say that I am appalled and amazed both at some of the stories that some of them have shared with me. And I really want all of us men to stand up, look at ourselves with absolute full integrity, full honesty, and really be truly authentic as to whether or not we are really living an unconditional man, or living as an unconditional man. It is unbelievable to me. Even small things have huge impacts on the women in our lives, and it actually resonates through a lot of their lives. And as a man myself, there are things that I've experienced that men have done, and as a result of some of the stories I've heard, I've started to think differently about my own experiences as well, and not to the same extent, not doing the same thing, but I think I can relate a little bit, and it's changed the way I look at things. So let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep being better as men. Let's keep working hard to understand how important we are in this world, and more importantly, as men, let's live up to some of the standards that the women in our lives are actually setting for us. They're setting the stage. Women empowerment movement has been going for some 30, some 40, 50 years now. I'm in awe of the supportive nature that the women have created, the groups, the community they've built for themselves. And we don't have that as men, not nearly to the same extent that we really could have. to a large degree, we've been taught to avoid our emotions. And let's say, we're allowed to have anger. Curse and swear as much as we want and throw things around and get angry. We're allowed to do that. But it's just a type of emotion. But let's talk about some of the other emotions as well. And let's not be afraid of those ourselves. Let's lean into whatever emotions we have and share them and learn from them and listen to the women in our lives. I mean, truly listen, not with your ears, with your entire body, with your entire presence. Don't get defensive. Just simply experience what they've experienced. Maybe we can become better ourselves. So let's work really hard to become less conditional as men and become more unconditional men.
Disagree the podcast. I recognize that was really long, but I wanted to give some context to our conversation that we're going to have today. If you remember back on October 15th, there was a tweet from Alyssa Milano, which basically, you heard at the beginning, was Me Too, suggested by a friend. If all the women who have been sexually assaulted tweeted Me Too as a status, we might give the people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet. Well over 68,000 replies to Milano's tweet. The tweet has been, this was as of last Monday, so we're well ahead of this. More than 500,000 times on Twitter, more than 6 million Facebook users as of last Monday. We're talking about Me Too. And Instagram has more than 300,000 posts associated with the hashtag. Again, that was as of Me Too. Or as of last Monday. Today, we are recording part 2 of what I've now called 3.5 series of this Me Too conversation. If you remember, Sunday we recorded the conversation with female Alexis, who you heard at the beginning, Jenn, and Courtney and Kali. And you can listen to that podcast on Spreaker.com on part 1. Today, I have 2 men joining in a man-only discussion. And if you're on this and you click and play and you're hoping this is going to be the mansplain podcast to debate all the responses to this and debate statistics and facts and what is this and what is that, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Here are some of the stories since we recorded 4 days ago. While we were recording a podcast at the Buffalo Bills game, during the tailgating, there were men, by the way, I'm just going to point out, white privileged men. No reason why I'm pointing that out, but I am going to point that out. They were actually tossing women through tables and breaking them, a la professional wrestling. And there were men cheering them on, smacking them on the butt and cheering them on. Rachel McAdams detailed an alleged harassment. I'm going to say alleged, but she is one of many that has been taking this by storm to not Harvey Weinstein, but another screenwriter by the name of James Toback. So it's not only Harvey Weinstein that's the problem. There's been allegations about Bob Weinstein. There's been allegations about a number of different people. So James Toback is another one that we can add to the list. And a popular YouTube vlogger named Adam Blampede from What Culture announced on Twitter that he has to take a leave of absence after admitting to soliciting nude photos from multiple women. He apologized because he falsely claimed to several women via social media that he was in an open relationship with his girlfriend as a means to repeatedly get them to message, encourage them to send images of themselves. I'll leave that to your imagination what exactly the images are. And right here in Metro Vancouver, Pitt Meadows City Councillor David Allen Murray has been convicted of sexual assault. The mayor of Pitt Meadows, John Becker, calls Murray his best friend and says council has no legal mechanism to force Murray out. So as you can see by these 4 stories from the last 4 days, and there are a number of more, that the conversation that we are about to have is relatively very important. I'm joined by 2 guests here from my hometown, my former hometown, because really this is my hometown, of Calgary, Alberta. The man that you heard at the Facebook post at the beginning is Curtis. Hello, Curtis.
Hello?
Oh, there we are. You scared me there.
I wasn't sure if that was a cue or just
No, I rambled. I'm sorry. That was pretty lengthy at the beginning. Maybe, Curtis, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into this conversation. Why you want to participate? Tell us about you.
Sure. Well, for me, I guess I'm a plus 50-year-old white male. I don't know whether I consider myself privileged or not, but I'm sure that some people could categorize that. Middle class, pretty well balanced household and family life. Married with 2 kids myself, and just going through life the way that many people are going through. I am a little bit different in that I've discovered over the years that I've got a pretty strong sense of empathy, and that has gradually led into a bunch of friendships with women, proper friendships, and those friendships have led to some really interesting conversations that have led to some absolute mind-blowing tales of life experiences that my friends have had. And because they're friends and there's emotions attached to that, and particularly the emotions associated with empathy, I've really have sort of become a bit of an advocate or a staunch protector, as it were, of just human decency, and the concept or the context of the Me Too movement here really struck home with me because of my friendship with these women who've had really negative experiences with men, and I don't believe in being a voice making noise in the world the way that social media has made it so easy to do. I believe in being a voice as an advocate for change and standing up and doing something and trying to make a difference. And whether I do or not is irrelevant. The point is that I'm trying, and I just really truly want to make it life better, because some of the women that I met and have got to know are just absolutely amazing people in their own right. Did not deserve to be mistreated in any way, shape, or form. Some of them were in relationships. Sometimes some of the experiences were at work, and in my working with businesses, I certainly see a lot of some of the things that are alluded to by the various women in your podcast there, and reflecting back, I'm rather ashamed that I didn't step up. I was rather ashamed I didn't be the voice, an advocate for change that I just said I'd like to be, or I believe I am. But it took me a few years to actually get to the point where I could actually do that. I'm there now, so I'm doing what I can now.
Thank you, Curtis. And here in Vancouver, in the Vancouver Central Library, the Terry McBride Studios. Should mention it because this is actually a fantastic setup.
Yeah.
Curtis, you got to tell people about why a library works great. I should send you a picture of what we're sitting in right now because it's actually quite fantastic.
Yeah.
Is T Crane, who this is the first time we've met.
Yeah, we've been connected on Facebook for a couple of years now.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm also sort of from Calgary, which is hilarious that we got 3 Calgarians sitting here talking about this. I've been out here since the mid-'80s, and I appreciate very much what you said. I, too, am a over 50 white male, and I certainly am privileged. I'm from the old punk scene as well, one of the original punk peoples. So I got a little taste of what it's like back then to lose just a slight dose of my privilege. And it was shocking to me. And I'm thankful for it, but it's not even close to what women go through, what visible minorities go through. So yeah, I'm definitely a privileged human being. And it took a while. It took me growing out of my arrogance of youth before I realized that I can actually leverage that privilege to make a difference. So I'll say that, and you can probably relate to this, Curtis. Our generation, we were raised in a certain way in the patriarchy that actually poisoned our thinking around certain things. Like, for instance, as I was raised being told that I'm the king of the castle when I get older, I'll have a wife that will be more of a servant than a partner. And I remember at the age of, I think I was 6, my dad going away and telling me I was now the man of the house. And I tried to boss my mom around, and that did not go so well. And my mom actually explained to me and made it one of her missions was to tell me and show me that she was the one that actually ran the household. She was the one that held everything together, which is very true. So I had the benefit of actually being raised mostly by my mom. She was my greatest teacher. But even so, because of the teachings that I was instilled with through exposure to society, being a young male growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was a part of the problem through my 20s. I had an awakening back then through an attack of empathy, which opened my eyes up to the fact that the reason I didn't feel right inside was because I was doing wrong things. And I made it a point for the rest of my life to stand up to my brothers when they behaved in an incorrect manner towards anybody, especially women, to try and correct. And I'll say right now that it began as a selfish reason, trying to make myself feel better about myself. But in fact, it really is a humanist movement that we have to stand up for each other. We, as people, as human beings, we have to stand up for each other. That includes women, that includes everybody. In this instance with the metoo campaign, I wasn't shocked and horrified, and that in itself is shocking, that pretty much every woman I knew typed out metoo. It is an epidemic. It's instilled in mankind and male kind. And really what it's going to take is it's going to take us teaching our sons, teaching our daughters, and also conscious men standing up to other men when they see, witness, or are around anything at all that smacks of harassment or abuse, and standing up to them and calling them out and not letting them get away with it. And it's not courageous, it's just the right thing to do.
All right. So
sorry,
I guess
that wasn't really an introduction. That was more of like,
that's fine. We'll get into that. I think you said enough there. I think that we can unpack a lot there.
All right.
And I noticed that both of you said the same thing. So I think we need to start with what Kali. I started with what Kali said. Is the silence on this from men has been deafening, and in some senses, some men are feeling that they want to just sit and listen, and there's also a sense of other things that are going on as well. But the biggest factor in all of this is, I will admit this as well, that I have heard and seen things, and I have turned the other way. And I'm wondering why, as men, we do that. And why is there this silence around this elephant in the room?
I think it's not just men. I think that my first experience with that kind of behavior was New York City in the early 80s, when I saw a guy get hit by a car and a crowd form around him and just stare at him. This is before cell phones, otherwise they'd all been videoing it and taking pictures of it too. But this is the way we are as human beings. We've stopped feeling compassion and empathy for one another. We've stopped interacting because we don't want to get involved, we don't want to get in the way. And I think that has to stop. So when I see something, I step up, and I've done that for quite a while. But I do know a lot of people that will look the other way. A teacher of mine said that not everybody's a helper. And if you look at photographs of like the Boston bombing, you will see most people running away, and you'll see a handful of people running towards. And it's those people that are wired in some way to take action and to do something. I think that it's a natural state for those people to do that, but I think also we can be taught to be that way. We can be taught to want to help. But that comes from connection, it comes from learning, and I think with men especially, most men, and I'm going to call you on this, are afraid to admit they're part of the problem. because that's a weakness.
Yes.
Being responsible and taking accountability is a tough thing, man.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I will echo a fair bit of what you just said in there. I think there's a lot of just under the category of helplessness, just not knowing exactly what to do, so feeling helpless. So which translates very quickly into immobilization and therefore inaction. And I think my experience myself, and then watching a lot of men around me, is really and it's not just all men. There's a good number of women as well. Have been raised in an environment where we are disassociated with our emotions rather than learning how to connect with them. And because we're disassociated, it's kind of a scary thing to deal with things. And where I do disagree a little bit with you there, T, is on the courageousness side. I think it actually is courageous to stand up. It's definitely the right thing to do to stand up, but it takes a lot of courage because, especially for men who are in a society of where you can be and have been, and I've seen it. I've experienced it myself, ostracized, or made fun of, or otherwise been the brunt of jokes because I've stood up and said something and only become the target myself. And if you're not strong emotionally or you're not ready for that, that's a really scary thing. And to be able to turn around and then start to face that down, knowing that that's likely going to happen when you do stand up, that does take a lot of courage. And my experience with working with teams in businesses is, it's not the first people that make the change. It's the people that come in after that. It's the first movers that start creating a movement of change, a wave of change. The people that started, they just kind of inspire the next wave. It's the next wave that actually starts making the change. And if it's true that quote unquote all men are silent on this, and where are all men on this, I think I have to say I think I noticed that myself, but I know that in that first week of the Me Too movement, every woman that I knew that said Me Too, I made a point of going to their post and making a personal commitment to them as a man to do better. Mm-hmm. So it's not all men. I know I made some steps in there, but I'm also not going to make a sweeping change. I'm just one of the first people doing that, as are the two of you. We're just free men in a world of men and other people that are still trying to figure this stuff out. And we are in a changing society, changing environment, politically, relationshiply, generationally, and even sexually. That has created a lot of uncertainty in the world, but that's a good thing. It's just a very unsettled time right now. So we just got to keep teaching and doing what we believe is the right thing, and hopefully it is the right thing. And it's not just our ego stepping in. Here's what I mean by that, because I actually truly believe it is the right thing to step up for other and advocate for other people's rights, yep. To live a happy and healthy life. Yep. But it does take courage for us to do that, and I think any men out there listening, find that courage in yourself. Find that inner warrior that's in a lot of our masculine energy to rise above the fears that we might have of speaking out, and for the women to support them, to give them encouragement, not by oppression, not by threats, not by pointing a finger and saying it's your fault and you're not doing enough, but just saying, we understand that it takes courage. We've had to go through that ourselves, and reverse empathy, and together, men and women can actually make some big change here.
Yeah, one of the things that I in terms of the standing up, that I think is a big thing for men. Is so there's a 6'3", 250-pound guy pushing around a woman, and I look at myself as a 5'8", 170 I look at that and go, well, I don't have much of a chance to really do anything. And the point that I'm drawing out here is for men, the response is like, look, don't do that. Oh yeah, what are you gonna do about it? And then it's a feeling of, and I'm doing this because using that voice to illustrate the point that for men, I think the power part is we feel that has to end in fists.
Yeah, well, even sexual harassment is not about sex; it's about power.
Yeah,
and that's usually where men come from, as a place of power. I would say that there's more ways to distract somebody who's engaging in that behavior than challenging them to a fist fight. I'm 5'3". I mean, I've got martial arts training, but I don't have to use it because I tend to try to distract. And that's really the spirit of Aikido, is distracting and bringing about peace. So most people that are engaged in something, if you take their attention away from what they're doing, you may not be able to change who they are as a human being, but at the very least, you'll stop the situation from escalating. And I think that's just as important as allowing a ceasing of escalation. I have called 911 when I've seen things that I can't get involved in. I followed a guy with a knife who was chasing a woman. I was only about 20 feet behind him while I was on 911 until they took him down. I do stuff like that because I can't jump in and disarm the guy with a knife. It's too dangerous. But I can be right there that if he got too close to her, I could yell at him, he'd turn around and give her more escape time while I'm talking to the police. So there's all kinds of ways that you can involve. I've stood between people on a bus. I've just moved from where I was in my comfortable seat and stood between two people that were going at it so that they had me as a barrier between them. And it de-escalates everything. There's all kinds of ways that we can de-escalate and interfere and distract to change a situation from what it is. I am going to say this, though, and it's a little point that I disagree with you on, Curtis.
Yep, please.
And it's that the women don't have to do anything. It's the men that really have to do something right now. And I don't want any woman who's listening to this or in the world to really feel like you have to teach us what to do or support us in doing this. I say, screw that, you don't. It's really, the onus is upon men to be frickin' men, to stand up, own, and be responsible for who they are. And it's okay, admit that you screwed up, admit that you got some weird values that you have to reassess and change. That's okay, but own it first. The first step is owning it, the second step is not tolerating it. And that's the process of redemption, is to admit, decide you won't do it again, apologize through action, and carry on in the world. And if all of us do that, that's great. And really, I had a conversation with my girlfriend last night. I said, what do you say to all of this? And when I was running things by her, I said, what do you feel the women's role in this should be? And she goes, our role, we've already had our role in this. You guys have been pushing us around our whole lives. That's our role in this. We don't need any more role. Just stop it. Leave us out of it and fix it. And I totally 100% agree with her. It's a problem that men have created and men have perpetuated, and men, it's up to us to stop it.
Yeah, I guess maybe I use the word support, and I actually have to say I completely agree with everything you said. There's some great points there. I think I probably used the word support incorrectly. I think as I was listening to you, I'm going, the word I probably should have used is hold space for us while we catch up.
Yeah.
Give us a chance to catch up. We're infants in this whole realm of how to be better. Women have been doing it for generations now, and we, as the collective whole, as men, have not been working on being better. But we, how they can support us is actually hold us space. Don't point fingers in anger. Give us that chance to actually become better. Is really what I meant to say when I use the word support. I don't mean that they don't actually need to do anything for us, but give us a chance.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Fair enough. Do you think that there are men afraid to get involved in this conversation?
Oh gosh, yes. How many men are on this call right now?
3.
Out of potentially how many did you reach out to?
4. I was thinking about two other people. I really I didn't say this at the beginning, but I was really thoughtful about who I would bring on this because I think that this is very important. So honored that you guys joined in this conversation. But I also posted, and one of the reasons I selected both of you, I feel like I'm hiring you for something, and I'm not, or putting it out that way. But when I asked after all this what the men were feeling, there weren't a lot of men that commented. It was a lot of women that were like, thank you for asking the question, but there was no men. You commented, T. Curtis commented. You posted your commitment. A couple of other people did. But there wasn't a lot of...
in my news feed, and I wanted to assure the women that you had on your first podcast of this, there are good, conscious men in the world.
Absolutely.
I think it depends on who you expose yourself to, because my news feed was not devoid of men interacting. And I'm really grateful for that. Turns out I know a lot of good, conscious men. So a lot of them were commenting, and a lot of them were hashtagging me too as well. Because men do violence. We are prone to that. We're raised with that. It's our way of communicating because we don't work on our emotions. And so the only emotions, as you mentioned earlier, Curtis, that we're really allowed to express are anger. And every once in a while, love, as long as it's private and nobody else sees us doing it. But as far as understanding emotional intelligence, and I see this in my work all the time, I hold programs and courses in emotional intelligence. 95% of the attendees are women. 5% are men that were dragged along by women that they know.
Yep.
And that's pretty much the demographic of that. Now, that's not to say that the men don't benefit greatly when they leave. They really do. At the end, they go, wow, I'm really glad I came. But if they were to, on their own, decide to go to something like that, they wouldn't. Because it's hard for men to admit that, number one, they need help, because we have this false sense of strength we have to project all the time, because anything else is a perceived weakness, which means we'll be killed and eaten. So we have this false sense of bravado, and I think we have also confused masculinity with machismo. And machismo is an ego-based behavior, whereas masculinity is an energetic or a spiritual-based behavior.
That's right.
And when men get more in touch with their masculinity and let go of the machismo, you'll see a lot more consciousness coming through in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's okay. So machismo, is that how we say?
Yeah,
machismo,
macho,
macho,
nacho.
and masculinity.
Yeah.
Because, and that's a big topic in this, is what is masculinity, really? Because we have an image of it, we're supposed to portray an image of it. Those guys at the tailgating thought they were being macho or masculine, or, I mean, the idea that we're supposed to lift all the heavy equipment, and, I've been through that, and I can't always do that myself, so I don't feel necessarily masculine about that. Let's maybe expand on this masculinity, because I think that this is a huge heart of the issue that we're hitting here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there's something there for sure, and it's what's the word I'm looking at? So the confusion between the ego-driven side and machismo, whatever words you want to apply to it, rather superficial. There's not a lot of depth to it. Again, we've talked about steering away from emotions rather than leaning into them. Other than the emotions that we actually society allows us to have, it's prevalent in actually both genders. I've certainly seen it around. There's a fear of quote unquote going there, and some of the work I've done personally myself as growth over the years is I've always come out a better man, a stronger man, a more connected man when I've leaned into my emotions. And some of the hardest moments of my life, the most painful moments of my life, was when I really leaned into the emotions I was experiencing. At one point, it actually took me to my knees. It was so painful. I lost all motor ability in my muscles. But it was a huge moment. It was a pivotal moment that really fundamentally changed my life. And as a result, I've learned to be fearless, as it were, of the emotions I'm feeling. If I feel an emotion, I immediately want to now connect with it. And it's a very freeing experience, I have to say, and I know that's part of my underlying message that I want to leave people with here today is man or woman, if you find fears associated with your emotions, try turning around and facing that fear, and see what happens. Try it for a while. Try doing the exact opposite of what your natural instinct is. You might be surprised at how strong you really are. But that aside, one of the things that's imbalance in our society right now is, I think it has a lot to do with some of the women's movements that have built up over the last 30, 40, or 50 years. Women have actually become very connected in both their feminine energy as well as their masculine energy that they have. Well, men have masculine energy as well as feminine energy, and yet we're told that it's not allowed, but we do have it. And there's this thing called dissociative anima, not enema, but anima. It's a Jungian principle, and it talks about how men. It's actually put into more colloquial terms. Just means men turning away the feminine side, and there's some powerful things about them. I mean, it's the feminine side refers to nurturing. It refers to empathy. The masculine side refers to assertiveness and possibly aggression, hopefully controlled if it comes to that. Because some of the biggest problems come with uncontrolled aggression, but understanding how we need to have that balance in each of ourselves, and as well as our collective society, is where the imbalance is going on right now. That's what I see. It sounds like you've done a fair bit of work in this same area. T. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think bringing the conversation back around to what it comes down to is, what does it mean to be a man in a philosophical sense?
Yep.
We don't have our rights of manhood anymore. We don't have that ethical, moral ground that men used to be taught. And we have a lot of, fatherless sons in our world, and even more so now because both parents work. There's a lot of disconnection between passing on the moral value and ethical value that a man is supposed to be. And yes, masculine traits include things like security, provision, holding space, being solid, being the rock. And the feminine holds values like nurturing, encouragement, things of that nature that are life-giving. So we tend to be the riverbank, and the feminine tends to be the river. And the river has a lot of energy and momentum, but needs the riverbank to work with in order to have velocity and power. And likewise, the riverbank's pretty useless without a river. So these two energies work together, and all of us have a combination of those energies. There's feminine in all men, and there's masculine in all women. So it doesn't mean that you're gender. It's not a gender-based thing.
No, absolutely not.
But coming back to this discussion, I think that what it means to be a man is when you're able to stand up, and I'm going to go back to saying I don't believe it's courage, because I think the courageous ones in all of this are the women that have been putting up with our crap for all this time.
Oh, here, for sure.
I think that it's an obligation, I would say, more than anything else. And it's kind of like when you're a kid and you did something wrong and you got to own up to it. To me, that's not courageous. To me, that's being responsible. And once you become responsible, it's not always easy to be responsible, but it's a natural state you fall into. And it doesn't really acquire the application of courage. It becomes almost a necessity to feel okay. When I was talking at the beginning about my own story, that's what it became for me. Something was wrong. Something was missing in me. And in order to reconcile that, I had to change myself. And I do believe that people can change. I think that it takes concentrated effort, but everybody can change. And one thing I've also noticed too is it only takes 2 generations of youth before an idea is wiped out and eradicated. So if we begin teaching our children and we begin evolving ourselves, this problem can go away in no time at all. But we have to do it now, and we have to be relentless in our application of it, and that's men. And I also know too that women are sick of being leaned upon as far as this goes. And I'm only smiling because I wouldn't dare ask my girlfriend to support me while I work through this, because she would leave me probably. She would look at me and go, "You're not the guy I thought you were. Like, what do you mean support you through this? Come on, stand up on your own 2 feet." And that's a masculine trait that my girlfriend also possesses, standing up on her own 2 feet and facing things. Yep. So that's a powerful trait, and that's a healthy one to foster and to grow, and it's one I think that a lot of people hide behind. And I think also because we've got computer screens we can hide behind and phones we can hide behind, we have anonymity that's really new and strange, that it's easy for people to be a troll than it is to take responsibility. And really what it is just a movement in your own world, in your own private world. Every man that hears this, start standing up, and that'll spread. Somebody else will see it and take it as an example. But you got to clean up your own world. And you got to come to terms with the fact that if you're male, you have committed sexual harassment or a form of sexual assault at some point in your life, period. It's not avoidable. You've whistled, you've made a woman feel uncomfortable at some point. I'm not saying you're a terrible person for having done that, because that's what we were raised to be. But here, when you become aware of it, is your opportunity to stop and evolve. But until you admit it...
Well, take a page out of your comment. That's actually an obligation, not an opportunity.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. As soon as you're aware of it, your obligation is to turn around and make a change, make a decision to make a change.
Yep. I agree it's an obligation, but I'm going to present it as an opportunity to make it easier for my brothers.
Right. I'll come back to it. I love the reframe of obligation versus courage, but I will say it for some men, depending on their circumstance, their paradigm, the situation you're in, it may take some courage to actually to accept that obligation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that's the same way to use the word opportunity to make it more palatable. Any men out there, just say if it's fear based, find the courage. Be a man, stand up, find that courage, and make a decision to make a difference. But for yourself, if nothing else, for yourself. But yeah, no, it's I love that reframe about obligation. That really resonated with me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I as well. When you were talking, I was thinking about you were talking about catcalls, and we've all done some form of sexual harassment. Can we talk to the younger men? Because I'm over the age of 40. We're over, and I don't know if younger self would have had this conversation. Probably, quite likely, would have avoided this like the plague, in some ways. So, for the younger men that might be listening, let's kind of talk about what it was like for us in being 20s and horny and thinking we were all that in a bag of chips, and having men tell us, "Hey, go get her," or for terms like "I tap that," or stuff like that. Kind of the language that we've used over time, and how that's kind of impacted the conversation and how you approach it now.
Well, back in those years, I was a performer, stage performer, singer in bands, spoken word artist, that kind of stuff. So I was a public figure. And I was a shameless womanizer as well, because I was very available to me. And I looked at it like it was feeding a part of me that I felt was deprived through my youth. And I wish that every woman that I didn't take to heart, I could apologize to. And I certainly would if I faced them again. Because that was cold. That was really soulless and cold. I was doing it completely for my own self-aggrandizement. There was nothing at all that I wanted to provide for anybody else, although I pretended that. But it was all to make me feel better about me. So that awakening that I had, I think, thankfully, for my own redemption, made me pause and reassess how I saw myself in the world. I was a shameful opportunist, and I needed to shift the way that I was. Now, there's all kinds of reasons why I was that way, but don't want to risk it sounding like excuses. I understand myself really well and how I ended up there. And even more so, I've dedicated my life to never going back there again and setting an example that no matter what your circumstances were or how you grew up, you can evolve. And I think that's what's really important. So, if I had a young 20-year-old man around me hanging out, and I've got some that were clients of mine, actually, they're good conscious males as well. And it's really about being honest, knowing yourself and being honest with yourself and being honest with those around you. That's really what it comes down to. When I went through a phase where I was into open relationships, it's all about honesty in that. That was a great learning experience. Everybody has to know everything that's going on, and you have to be really upfront about everything. And that's hard to do. And if somebody can't handle it, you have to be very empathetic and understanding, compassionate, and allow them to release from it. So again, it's not for everybody. It's not for me anymore. But at that time, it was a great learning experience. So I think if you do things from a point of view of integrity, of honesty, and of openness, you're on the right track. And that's what needs to be instilled into young men today, is to be straightforward, be honest, and know yourself. And a lot of young men are confused about who they are.
Do you see, working with younger men, do you see an evolution into what the current vernacular and language is and the vernacular back in our day?
I think they have access to more of everything. So they have access to the stuff that makes you conscious, and they have access to the stuff that makes you unconscious in a much more rapid way. Porn is a big one, for example. It's very unrealistic. And it's the way most kids nowadays get their education in sexual relationships, is through pornography on the internet, which is incredibly unrealistic. There's problems with young men becoming impotent because of that, which is ridiculous. Poor guys, man. I'm glad I was raised in the golden age of promiscuity, because we didn't have that stuff. We had to wear a disguise and go into a store and buy a magazine. Whereas nowadays, you don't have to do that. And I think that it's ruined a lot of young men in certain ways, the prolificacy of that. I'm not anti-porn, I'm pro-erotica, but I think there has to be a measure of teaching that has to accompany anything that's new in our world. So, I think that I've seen both sides. I've seen young men that just blow my mind. They're so advanced and so amazing and so aware, woke, as you might say. And I've seen other ones that I just can't believe that their heads are made of stone, just granite. Like, what is wrong with you? So
isn't that fairly true of most generations? I can think of examples in just about every generation that I'm exposed to in my life where you see that same kind of spectrum.
Yeah, well, again, it depends on what you're exposed to and what you're taught, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's. I think I would have to say, thinking back to my days when I was in the 20s or younger, even. The degree of sexuality, the type of sexuality has definitely shifted. It's certainly ease of access to porn and things like that. Back in my high school days, it was a big deal if somebody caught a glimpse of a girl's boob. And now I hear stories of sex parties, and that. Maybe I was just in a bit of a sheltered box, but I certainly never heard of that one in my high school days. As I got older, you heard more of those kinds of things. But certainly the access to porn and other sexual activities through social media and the internet and all that has definitely shifted. But I think it's also, in some ways, actually relieved some pressure off of that, because and what I'm coming from is there's a couple of young men I know who are incredibly well connected to themselves and to the women in their lives, and even to society. And when I think about it, all of them were effectively single parent households, and it was the mother who was the single parent. So a strong feminine influence which has allowed them to actually be more connected with their own natural feminine energy. Rightly or wrongly, may be missing out on teaching of the masculine energy by a father figure, as it were, but somehow still getting it. Because I think this is where I find I'm in awe of women. It's especially a lot of these friends that I have who are single moms and have been for, in some cases, 10 years or more. How effective they are balancing that masculine and feminine energy and instilling both in their kids. And I don't know many men could actually pull that off. So and I think that to some degree our younger generations maybe perhaps better set up than our generation, the three of us.
Yeah, I think 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in a lot of cases. And I agree with you that there's been the extremes in all generations. I just think that things happen quicker now than they did when we were young.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Everything moves so fast now. It's crazy.
And just a point, I know some single dads that are really awesome at balancing those two energies. You know, what are you doing tonight?
No, I didn't want to take
I'm
away.
dyeing my daughter's hair, you know, and it's like, okay, man, awesome. And, you know, see pictures of them with, like, their hairs and ribbons and they got makeup on because they let the daughters crawl all over them. And there's some really awesome single dads out there. There's a lot of deadbeat dads out there, too, and I think that's a lot of the problem that goes on nowadays. George Carlin had a great quote about that, about fathers. He said, I don't believe in heaven or hell, but if there is a hell, it's filled with fathers. And rightly so, because I think we've lost our way. I think men have lost their way a long time ago. I think we've lost that instilling of what it is to be a man, and I think a lot of us are misguided boys, and we end up growing up that way.
Absolutely, yeah. No. And, it's funny, we're really dating ourselves. Your George Carlin reference made me think of an episode of MASH, where Hawkeye and Charles were having a conversation, and just to cut straight to the point, Charles made a point to Hawkeye that I don't have a dad like you do. I have a father.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there was a wonderful story that took place in India a few years ago. Well, not wonderful. I mean, it's kind of horrible, but it turned out wonderfully. Where there was a village that was being raided by rogue elephants, which is not in an elephant's nature. These young male elephants were coming in and actually killing people and destroying small villages. And they didn't know how to deal with this. And this, again, is not typical elephant behavior. So an elephant expert was brought in to find out what was going on and to find these elephants. And right away what he did was he went and he said, you know, we have to find an elder male elephant from another herd, a well-balanced herd. Because this particular herd, all the males have been poached for their tusks. So they found a male from another herd and they brought him and transplanted him into this herd that was missing all the elder males. And the rogue incidents stopped. The younger male elephants began behaving like elephants. And one of the reasons was because they did not have a role model. They didn't have a healthy male elephant role model. So they were just being young, adolescent, teenage boys that were running crazy, which is what young adolescent teenage boys will do. So they were self-taught. And we really do need to, and I understand this is what you do as well, Curtis, is mentorship is so important. And I'm really big on mentorship. If we can mentor our youth in any way at all, if we can set an example, and this is part of stepping up as well, is stepping up and being that for young men, for being that for young women. One of the things I wanted to instill in my daughter was how she should be treated. when she encounters men in her life. And I want to set that bar really, really high so that she knew what to expect and what to not tolerate when it came to young men. And I think I did an adequate job. She's pretty smart, really tough, fiercely independent, and I'm very, very proud of her and how she's ended up. My son, same thing. He's a wonderful, conscious young man, and very proud of both of them. But I think the onus is upon dads and is upon elder males to be that, to step up and be that, to mentor.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, that's a big part. That's you were talking, it was funny you brought that. I was like, we need to have that conversation around the idea of mentoring and what that looks like. Not that, like, I'm not the guy to sit here and tell you that I've got this all figured out, because I, quite frankly, don't. At all. But, I mean, but I think the idea of even at any level of life, you need to have someone that teaches you something at some point. And back to that real man conversation, sometimes it's really hard for men, or we've made it too hard on ourselves to actually ask for help, because that's apparently unmanly, but it would be manly to ask for help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, much better to be a screw-up than to have your act together and appear weak.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have a mentor. I've had a mentor for years, and I've had mentors every time I engage myself in a new business or a new activity or a new learning. I go and I seek out somebody that can be my mentor for that. The most successful people on the planet have mentors. It really is something that we shouldn't be afraid of, that we should embrace, because if you want to get ahead in this world, you need a guide.
Yeah.
And, seek out the people that know that area and go drink in the knowledge and information and then improve upon it. And that's how we evolve, and that's how we get better. I mean, that said, we're living in a world right now where we're seeing a polarization of evolution and non-evolution, de-evolution going on. There's polarization of consciousness and unconsciousness. So all the more reason to step up our game of consciousness and to really stand up and to encourage others to stand up. And I'm going to go back to what we were talking about earlier, Curtis, and just say that I think it's up to men to provide the comfortable, safe space for other men to step up. Because
absolutely.
What does that look like, though?
Well, if I look at a brother and I'm calling him on his stuff, I'm not going to just chew him out. I'm going to say, it's okay, man. Own this. Step up, be a man, and own it. And I'm calling to his masculine self. I'm saying, come on, step up and own this. I know you got that in you. And I'm also going to encourage you and challenge you to step up. But I'm going to frame it in such a way that it makes something come alive inside of you where you want to do that. I'm not going to try and beat you down. I'm not going to try and go to fists with you. I'm going to try and rise that thing in you that is calling to you, because every man has it. And that's that masculine nature. That's what I want to wake up and stand up.
Now, when you say masculine nature, what does that look like to you? Just in case someone's like, someone gets all
bent out of shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, interesting, because I can feel it, but to describe it is very challenging. I even asked my partner last night, I said, you said I'm very masculine. What does that mean? And she said, oh, well, it's a feeling. I said, can you describe it? As a woman, I'd like to hear what your view of what masculine is. And she said it's kind of like a confidence, but not confident. It's a strength and a knowing. Like there's a safety and a solidity that's there. It's like you know what you want and you know what you're doing and you just go for those things. Which, hearing it is very surprising, because I'm always wondering, is this what I should be doing? How should I adjust this? Like inside there's a different conversation going on. But it's that presentation of, okay, I'm going this way, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm really solid about. So when I confront a brother, for example, I look him in the eye and I call him on his stuff. And it's like, hey, man, we're both of the same genus species, so let's pay attention to this. I'm calling you on this. I'm challenging you to rise up and be a man. Stop acting like a little boy. Be a mensch.
Be a mensch.
Yeah.
Be a mensch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curtis, define masculinity from your perspective.
Well, I feel pressure to have to do something different and more original, but I think you sort of hit the nail on the head for me as well. I know that some of the women that I'm friends with, because I've asked similar questions of my wife of 25 years, and we're coming up 25 years, and my friends, and some of them have actually seen me mature through my boyhood into manhood, and it's pretty recent, I have to say. It took me nearly 50 years to become a man, and that, to me, I think is a resoluteness in being better. It's a resoluteness in standing up. There's something you said there, T, that really resonated with me when I'm approaching another man about behaviors or about actions or activities or just being better in general. I always approach it from the word nice. As in, no, I care enough. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone and have this conversation with you. As long as you're willing to have a conversation with me, are you man enough to match my will having this conversation? And I've never been turned down.
Yeah.
So it's much the same kind of thing. It's not cockiness. It's confidence. It's strength, but it's not power. It's connectedness with emotions as well as with balance.
Yeah, and your phrasing there was issuing a challenge, and the masculine really rises to challenge. It's kind of what gets us going.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe the last question I'll ask about this is now, because one of the topics we had is how do men involved in the Me Too movement. And one of the things I guess we didn't talk about too much is, and I wasn't sure how to handle this one, but I guess our role in the Me Too, and there are men, and we need to acknowledge this, there are men that have been abused sexually. And it's always been, in some senses, an authority figure. Sometimes it's women. Sometimes it's a spiritual leader. Sometimes it's a head coach or a sports person or a teacher. And that conversation is important as well. I don't agree with the people who are saying that we can't have that conversation. I think it can be a part of it. I think the problem is when it hijacks the other part of this conversation, and it gets to mansplaining it. And yeah, but men have this too. That's not the point of this conversation. So how, and you've used the word challenge, so I think this is appropriate. How do we challenge, how do I as a podcast host or social media crap disturber or whatever, how do we as men continue this conversation in a healthy way?
Well, I was sexually assaulted when I was 9 years old. And it was by a stranger, and it was in the woods. And I didn't tell anybody till I was 34. It filled me with rage. It messed me up like you can't imagine. It really screwed up my life. And that was one incident. I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to be what a woman goes through, where it's a daily thing, where you're afraid of who's walking behind you. You know, something that my partner was telling me was, she said she was in a room once, and it was gender studies or something like that. But anyway, the professor said, "How many of you men here tonight paid attention to walking to class? What did you see? What did you do? Did you do anything special coming to class?" And no hands went up. How many of the women in this class did things to prepare to walk to the class? Every single hand went up. They had the keys in their hand. They were paying attention to who was around them. They were watching dark shadows. They were watching in the corners. They were check the back seat of their car before they get in. All that stuff. They go through a massive checklist to avoid being attacked and jumped. I had it happen once, and it pretty much derailed my life. I can't imagine having that threat hanging over me every single day. So I think what's important is, yes, Me Too, but it's given me the ability to understand not understand, what a strange word to use in this case. It's given me an inkling of the the impact, not even an inkling. I mean, I can't even approach it. I can't even imagine what it's like to live life like that every single day. That fills me with rage. That really makes me angry. That makes me want to push a button somewhere and make it stop, but I can't. So, if anything, then it is a call to action for men that, man, if you haven't experienced this, you have no idea. I experienced it once, and I wouldn't wish it on the worst human being that's ever lived. Just the once. Let alone what goes on every day.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't think hijacking the thing, which men will tend to do, well, it happened to me too, and men can do it to men as well. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't happen to you every day, and you're not afraid of what you're dressing. And when people talk about rape, they don't talk about it like what you should do. You should dress differently. Then men won't rape you.
Yeah.
Well, how about you just teach men not to rape? I mean, that's an easier solution to it, much more permanent.
Yeah.
So that's what fills me with the rage and the impetus to actually try and make this difference as well, is because it's a profound effect that it has on people. And it has to stop, and it has to stop now. There you go.
There. Chris?
Oh, what the hell am I supposed to say after that?
Well.
I don't mean that to undermine anything. It's like, wow. I'm literally sitting here with my jaw on my belly right now. I want to commend you for rising up, sir. That's but I do agree that what little we men experience, it just absolutely pales in comparison to the constant bombardment that women have to deal with, probably on an hourly basis, never mind daily. And of course, the quote unquote more attractive you are, the worse it gets. But I'd like to, at the risk of sounding like I'm swaying things, I'd like to throw in that abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter whether it's sexual, emotional, or otherwise physical. Abuse is abuse, and none of it is acceptable. Period. All of it has long-term ramifications. It occurs, tragically sexually, but equally tragically emotionally and mentally. I've seen far too many men. I've done my best to try to change one man's perspective in my life, who is mentally and emotionally abusing his wife. I didn't actually know it at the time, but his behaviors were not correct, so I tried to make some changes. All it actually ended up doing was contribute to making the situation worse, and that abuse then started going onto the kids. And what I've witnessed in that scenario was the impact on the kids and on her was equally as damaging as any rape case I've ever experienced or heard of.
Yeah. Men can do some pretty horrible stuff to each other.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because it's about power, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for the most part, it's totally what it's about. We express sexuality.
Or is it about small penises and using power to try to compensate for that?
Well, I'm going to call you on that one because, again, that's one way that we deflect is by talking about dick size. It really has nothing to do with that.
No, feel free to call me on it. I threw that out there very intentionally. I wanted to throw that injection in there because it's a common thing, right?
It's a deflection.
Yeah.
Yep.
When really what it is it's a flaw that we have developed through the way that we're taught, the way that we're raised, and the fact that we aren't held accountable. And I wasn't held accountable for my poor behavior. In fact, some people actually admired my poor behavior, and some encouraged it. And that horrifies me at this point in my life. And if I could go back in time to that young me, I would take him aside, we'd go camping for a couple of weeks, and I would make it really, really clear to him and do my best to teach him that to feel some empathy, to walk a mile in the shoes of his sisters, to take a look at his own past, because I would know his past. At that point, he was hiding it. And I would say, no, use that as a frame of reference for how you feel about this. And I guarantee you he would have changed. But I didn't have a mentor in my life at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So...
no excuse.
Right. So basically, reframing language, standing up.
Yeah, and really, don't put anything on the women to do anything on this. This is men have to take care of our shit. We got to clean this mess up. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this or not.
Oh, I think as I said in the previous podcast, if someone is worried about that word and not focusing on any of the words that we spent the last hour and 10 minutes talking about,
right,
they're missing the point.
Okay. We got to take care of our own shit. We gotta rise up, and those of us that are waking up, that are doing our best to grow into being a man, the onus is upon us to share that with all of our brothers. And if the guy's 6'3" and acting like an ape, you can do all kinds of things without him even knowing you're there. Mm-hmm. You can call the police. You can get other people engaged. If you're in a bar, there's security staff there that can deal with it. You don't have to be the one that goes up and tries to go fist to fist with the guy, but you certainly can stop what's happening, de-escalate it, and interfere with it.
Right. Get the authorities involved. Don't
interfere with it in any way possible, by any means possible.
Yeah.
But the big thing is don't tolerate it in your space.
Right. So when we convene with the women, what is one topic that you think is going to be an important conversation we have when we gather together?
Well, talking to my partner about that, she's really angry. She's not angry at me. She's angry at men. She knows I'm doing my best. She sees that as being my effort to be sufficient in that. But she's super angry. And she's got every right to be. And so I think that allowing the expression of anger, of distrust, of even, well, we'll see, and not taking that personally. Because this isn't about, oh, yay, we're doing something for the women, or hooray, we're finally, there's no celebration in this. This is a serious bunch of hard work that men have to do that we've been having to do for a long time, and we've neglected that. There's no praise at the end of this rainbow, and there shouldn't be. That's why I say it's not courageous. It's past due. It's an obligation, right? What's been courageous is women putting up with it. So I think for women, whatever you need to do, whatever you need from anybody in your world, whatever you need from me as a man to help you heal in this, short of gouging my eyes out with a poker, I'm there for you. But I'm certainly not going to tell you how to behave or how to react or how to interact or what to say or how to feel about any of this. I can't imagine what it's like being a woman in this world. And I don't want to pretend that for 1 minute. But I will let you know, all of my sisters, I am there 100% to support you in whatever way I possibly can. And forgive me my shortcomings and understanding what that might be. But I'm going to do everything I can to work with my brothers on this.
Curtis?
It's for me. I've already started I started putting this here. I refrain from apologizing for other men's behaviors. It's not mine to apologize for. I can apologize for my behaviors to those whom I've impacted, and I'm willing to and have done so in every occasion I can. I try to not worry about changing the world of men for women or vice versa. But if I can encounter a situation with a woman who's had a negative experience with a man, I will do everything possible just to change her experience with what a man can, what an experience with a man can be like. Within whatever, being a married guy, there are some boundaries, of course, but decency is decency, and I live and exude that every moment I possibly can, and that is my commitment. Has been my commitment for some time now, and I think you mentioned earlier, T, that it's our actions. It's not apologies by words, but apologies by actions, and compensating by doing the not just better, but way better, and be the action of change, not the voice, but the action of change.
Yeah, for me too, I think doing stuff like this, starting this conversation, is a step in the right direction. There's a lot more that I personally have to do. But I think, I think starting these conversations, opening this door, is an awareness for me of things that I need to learn. I guess that's one of the things when you're opening the door, you get to learn a lot about yourself and where you need to fix this too, and areas you need to fix in your own personal areas. And I agree with what Curtis said. I can't apologize for other men. I can only apologize for myself, and just continue to speak into this conversation as best as I can and learn from my mistakes going forward, and know that I will make mistakes, but there's, as T mentioned, there is a redemption, but there needs to be a lesson in the redemption.
If I can just add to clarify the I won't apologize for other men's behavior thing, but I will be responsible for standing up and being everything I can be to shift that behavior and change it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because when we just say I won't apologize for other men's behavior, it's a bit of a slap in the face.
Yeah, you're right. I see what you're... I don't think that we meant it that way.
I know you didn't mean it, but I'm mansplaining to the men. That we should really be careful how we say that, because quite frankly, it is our responsibility.
Right.
And like I said before, every man is guilty of doing this at some point in their life. So every man is responsible for rising up and taking this on as well.
Yeah. And one of the challenges that I have had with this is wording. Mm-hmm. And being very conscious of some of the words that we use. Right. And for that, I'm sorry if that offended anyone, how I said that, because it was not. I don't think Curtis and I meant it in the way that it came out, but I do see what you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic mentoring. T, great leadership there. No, thank you. That is I definitely heard that. I think I want to speak for you, Kevin, but when I said that, I'm just saying that. I can only apologize for my own behaviors, and I do it, and I profusely will, and I deeply will work hard to never have to put myself through that situation again, and anybody who may have been hurt by that. So, yeah.
All right.
Well mentored.
Well mentored. Mentoring on the podcast as we're talking. So we're going to leave it here for now. We are going to gather everyone together. We're going to work this schedule out. We'll probably have to be in the same studio here. Thank you guys very much. I think this was a very enlightening conversation. I hope people listening will agree with that. I really appreciate your guys' honesty and courage in coming on, and what you guys talked about, I think, was great. I'm going to close with something that Kali said at the last podcast that we'll close this. Just before we are gathering everyone together, we don't have a date. I'm going to be interviewing Casey Logan, who is a Calgary Sun dating columnist. We're going to talk about the behavior of online dating, which we felt is a whole separate podcast in and of itself to unpack. So we're going to do that, and I may bring one other person in on for that as well. And so we'll leave you with what Kali said last time. Thank you very much for listening. Spreaker.com, KVOLE. Follow me on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. YouTube, Kevin Olenek. SoundCloud, KVOLE, etc., etc., etc. Talk to you all soon.
Yeah. I think if I were to ask the male population to do something, is to just listen. Talk to the women in your life, and don't interrupt them, don't talk over them, don't say me too, don't, just for the first little while, just listen. Because you'd be surprised how many women, and I will bet that every single woman you know has had some sort of experience. And this is actually my partner's idea, because he did this when dating, and decided, you know what, I don't think I understand this. And asked every woman in his life, have you had an experience of harassment or assault? And he was horrified by what he heard. But if it helps you to contextualize what we're talking about today, I would just ask that, just listen to the women around you and ask yourself, if you don't believe them or if you think it's not important, ask yourself why.